Hi there, my name's Simon Bowen. I'm the founder of the Models Method and creator of the Genius Model. We've found a way to help companies that sell complex products or services codify the genius that they bring to market and the genius that sits deeply and resonantly underneath every product or service they take to the market. That single shift changes everything about how they market and sell what they do. And it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you very much indeed for giving us your time today. I was watching your masterclass last week. I mean, I'd watched some of your videos, but I just think the whole concept is fascinating. Create a model to try and make the idea that you have in your head easy to understand for a customer or prospect. But how did you end up with this as your thing? How is this your genius?
My first working life was in electrics and electronics. And I'm old enough to have been on the back end of a non-digital world and then a digital world in the automotive and transport industry. So I was in the automotive and transport industry when vehicles did not have computerized control systems. And then was also in that industry when BMW brought out a new motor car with 7 onboard computers. I was in design and repair of digital systems and circuitry. And the reality is that you cannot do anything in electrical or digital work if you can't recreate reality in a circuit diagram, because you can't see electricity moving. You can't see electrons moving. So you have to understand the entire reality of what you're dealing with in a diagram on paper, a circuit diagram. But I also grew up in small country towns in Western Australia where, you know, if you were going to drive somewhere, they would grab a stick and draw the map in the ground and say, here's where you've got to go, you know, and turn 1 kilometre before the old gum tree, which is the craziest instruction ever, because you've got to drive to the gum tree and come back 1 kilometre to know where to turn, you know. But that's how everybody communicated. You know, if someone was going to build something, they'd draw out a picture first of what they were going to build. And then I was lecturing in what is in WA's TAFE, in a lot of countries is a polytechnic level, and then at university in electrics and electronics. I was teaching physics and maths and things like that. And you just get particularly teenagers to learn more rapidly when you turn like Ohm's law or any theory into a visual model they just remember it, right? They like Ohm's law, that the current flowing in the circuit is directly proportional to the voltage applied and inversely proportional to the resistance. They're never going to remember that. But if you turn it to a triangle with 3 letters on it, V for voltage, I for current, and R for resistance, you show them how to use the triangle, they can transpose the entire formula instantly, right, and use it to make calculations. It was probably always the way I thought about and communicated things. And then as I, got involved in organisational change management inside organisations, got into management and then executive levels of management and running sales teams and things like that, I always just sold by drawing models for people, and I assumed everybody did that. Like I never carried I never carried lined paper. I carried sketch pads to meetings.
Yeah.
And I would draw, people would go, we've got this problem, we've got culturally in the organisation, we've got some parts of the organisation that don't like each other and everything. And I'd draw what I call the engagement model that I built. And they go, that's it. That's what we got to do. And I go, great, let's do that as a project. And they'd say, well, can I get a copy of that page? And I used to carry an old like a digital camera. And they go, I'll take a photo and give you the page. And I'd tear the page out of the sketch pad. And then that forward scout, because there's always a forward scout when you're selling to large organisations, so I need to go back and tell everyone else about this. And I'd say, well, why don't you just get them all in a meeting and I'll come in and I'll walk back through all of these models for them that we've talked about today. And they could get a handle on that. They go, okay, I know exactly what you're going to talk about when you come in. Well, yes, I will organise the meeting for you. And then I'll just do the same thing to the group of people. Now, I assumed everybody thought through things in models and talked through things in models. And then one day someone said to me, you should teach other management consultants how to use models to sell as effectively as you do, because I built a really solid reputation in Australia for the consulting work that I did. And particularly for facilitation work, like government here will say to me, we're going to put 200 people in the room that hate each other. but they're unified in their hatred for us collectively as government. And they disagree on this issue, and we need you. We've got them for 2 hours. We need you to get them to agree. And I'm very confident about doing that, because I just figured out, if you've got people in disagreement and you've got 2 hours, if you just frustrate people for about 3/4 of the available amount of time, well, it's true. Like 3/4 is a bit of a magical mark mathematically. When you get to most people fall out of the 42-kilometre marathon at about 32K, or the 88K Comrade is about 63K. At about the 3/4 mark, most people give up on what they're doing, right? If you just frustrate a room full of people for 90 minutes, and that's easy to do, you just listen to everybody equally. People hate having everybody else listen to in equal measure to them. You just listen to everybody equally. No, that's a good idea. I'll capture that. And that's a good idea. I'll capture that. And that's a good idea. I'll capture that one for 90 minutes. And then at the 90-minute mark, kind of go, I think I can draw this, and go to a whiteboard and start building a model with the room and get them to help you build the model. At the 2-hour mark, they go, well, that's it. That's the solution. So people start saying, you should teach this. And I'm going, everybody uses models. And turns out they don't. And we turned it into an art form, basically. And it just exploded worldwide. And, so it's probably an eclectic background. I was raised in the country. I worked in, technology spaces, old and new. I led teams. I drove sales teams. I did organisational change management work across large companies and complex and contentious facilitation work. And the models emerged out, and teaching teenagers, my goodness. I would work with the most dysfunctional group of adults every day of the week, rather than getting in front of a room full of teenagers for 40 years in a professional career as a teacher. I was going to be a teacher, and then they cured me. But what I realised, and then we must get on to another question. What I realised was, anything that we do in the human world, its first appearance in the physical world, the metaphysical movement of an idea, from the brain to the real world as an outcome. So an idea for a computer that you and I are sitting in front of, or the desks or tables that we're sitting at, or whatever it might be, is an idea in somebody's head, and then it becomes a physical thing in the real world, right? But in between, almost everything is a drawing on paper first, or these days a drawing in a CAD program on a computer, or a design program. And so there's this really deep metaphysical shift of any human idea that becomes a real world item or artifact through a drawing on paper. So when you draw people in. There is something deeply organic about drawing. Drawing was all of our first languages. Cave art from our Indigenous people, our Aboriginal peoples, 60,000 years old before letters and words were known. If you think about the emotional connection to drawing, small children draw before they write letters and words and numbers. And they get a tremendous emotional response from their parents when they do a drawing, no matter how scratchy or bad it is. You're a genius, you're an artist, and we frame it and we put it up in the house. There's this deep emotional reward when we draw and when we're drawn in to a drawing. And so it isn't just the model itself, it's the actual process of physically drawing in front of people. We live in an increasingly digital world. I study psychology, so I'm very, very kind of fascinated by how people operate. But we live I could draw this for you, but perhaps don't have the time for it. But we live in an increasingly digital world. And a really simple example of digital world is PowerPoint. Click on, click on, click on. So click next, click. There's ones and zeros on and on and on, off, right? But humans are analog. And we will remain analog because we have a range of emotions and feelings and attention levels and everything else. So the audience will be familiar with, the typical digital curve, which is on and off. If it's a TV, it's blue screen, and then it's nothing, right? That's the digital sine wave. But humans are analog. And so if you are old enough like me to remember when we got a picture and then we had snow until it went. And, if it was a sporting event and we were using those indoor bunny antennas, someone was standing on top of a cupboard with one leg in the air trying to balance this thing, right? Well, there's a massive gap in this space between an increasingly digital world and humans. And when we draw like I'm drawing now, rather than using PowerPoint or anything else, we tend to allow the time for the digital human sine wave to occur while the drawing's occurring. Whereas if I just gone click, click, two sine waves here, there wouldn't have been time for the brain to follow it. And so what models do, and there's some real reasons why models specifically work, but first of all, they're tools for thinking. So any business is only as good as the idea on which it's built and the quality of thinking that's leading the business. So they are tools for thinking first and foremost. They require people to think through what they're doing at a much, much deeper level. So, if we map the genius of a company in a set of dot points, it will never be as powerful as if we get people to deal with the form and structure of a model to try and unpack their genius. The second thing a model does is become a really powerful tool for influence. Once you've built it, it becomes a really enormously useful artifact to involve people in helping to understand that. So long answer to what seemed like a short question, but
I guess most of these models are at your fingertips. You've got a model for sales value where you sort of say you've got to be selling one level above where the...
Yeah.
Do you know which one I mean?
Yeah.
And I was just thinking that you could pick another model if you like, but I was just thinking that was a model that particularly struck me. I think particularly in the tech world. You mentioned earlier BMW, right? They nobody goes, oh, I bought that car because of the tires, right? look, it came with Dunlop tires, so I bought it. And yet the tech world just says, oh, look, here's a list of features and benefits. Over to you, Mr. Prospective customer, to work out why this might be helpful. And there's no emotion.
That's absolutely true. And when we think about, to give this some context, I think in the last 2 years inside one of our, client forums, I've built about 500 models in the last 2 years. I hear conversations in models. I consume content these days in models. The more you do it, the more succinct your brain becomes when it captures information. So I read business books now and then I build a model of what the book was saying. We create a business book summary for our inner circle clients, and I summarize the book in a model. Usually the book doesn't have a model in it. And then if I have an interview with the author, like I summarize, I don't know if you've ever read it, a great book, fabulous book, is called Go Givers by Bob Berg. And then he also wrote a book, Go Givers Sell More. Really good book, Go Givers. And I summarized the book into a model, right? And made a book summary. And then I was interviewing him. So, by the way, Bob, I've turned your book into a model. He went, oh, really? Walk me through that. And I walked him through and went, could we use that? Can I have that? To teach what we're doing. The more you start to work with models, the more you start accommodating the world, like thinking about the world in models. And so invariably I start to hear a conversation in models. Now, interestingly, the model always starts with the geometry because geometry tells a story. For example, a triangle says you must have all three sides, otherwise this whole idea collapses. And then a lot of people will give a triangle and they'll label the sides. Now, that's not a model. That's just a list of three things. But it is at least saying you must have all three things, otherwise this will fail. What turns it into a model is when you say, well, what happens in here if you get side 1 and side 2? And what happens if you get side 2 and side 3? And what happens in here if you get side 1 and side 3? And then are there 2 dimensions on each side or 3 dimensions on each side? And what are those dimensions? All of a sudden you've got a model, right? So it always actually starts with the geometry. A 3-circle Venn diagram says, it's best if you have all 3 to get the outcomes, and the outcomes drive the middle. But what if you only had 2? Well, that's okay, but you won't get all of the outcomes, right? A 2x2 matrix is a comparative model of 2 dimensions, vertical and horizontal, meaning the best is up here and the worst is down here, and there's compromise on either side. So let's walk through that and understand So I generally am looking for geometry, and then I'm wanting to figure out what the content is. So that's when I would start to facilitate an audience into the conversation. And then the bit that I added onto it, once again, which is something I just assumed lots of people did and then since discovered they don't, is choreography. So we put a lot of effort into unpacking. I studied stage magic and comedy because they are, if you really want to, I don't mean this in a negative way, but if you want to invade someone's thinking space, now, if you want to change someone's perspective, you have to invade their thinking space and rattle their paradigm. You must. So changing someone's perspective is basically you saying the paradigm you're holding true may not be true, right? And so you must invade their thinking space. So we need two things to form and hold on to an opinion. To form an opinion, we need information, experience, and things like that. But to hold on to an opinion, we need to fight hard to stay ignorant of any evidence to the contrary. So to believe that the world is flat, you have to fight hard to ignore any evidence that it's actually a sphere, because that will shatter your opinion, right? And so opinions are fatally flawed. And it's not just me saying that. Einstein also said it, and I kind of believe him.
Well, isn't there, aren't there different, that's a belief though, isn't it? Because quite often I say to people, what fact could I give you that would allow you to change that belief or that opinion? And if people say nothing, then it's a belief.
Yeah, I don't want to know the facts, Dominic. Like, why would I want to know any facts that changes my belief that the world is flat?
It shatters your self-illusion, self-belief.
Like, belief and opinion are very close to each other. If we want to change someone's perspective, it requires us to change their paradigm of a circumstance, change their opinion, right? And if you want to change someone's opinion or paradigm, you have to invade their thinking space. But you can't do it by force because they will just push back. You have to find a way of doing that firstly makes them safe. So when we talk about selling, we have a really, really strong belief around a concept I call buyer safety. You need to sell in a way, now whether you're a leader selling to your team or you're actually a salesperson selling to prospects, you need to sell and influence in a way that has the people that you're interacting with feel safer with you than they do with anyone else. Buyer safety. Because if they're not safe, they're not going with you. We have to let people feel safer with you than they do without you. And then we have to shatter their paradigm. You can't just knock it out. You've got to shatter it, right? And so what emotional state is the most productive emotional state for someone to let you shatter their paradigm and feel safe? And the answer is curiosity. Curiosity is the king of influence emotions, right? And so what is comedy and stage magic? Comedy and stage magic is just the process of set up, punchline or reveal. Now, all that the punchline of a joke or the reveal of a magic trick is shattering, rapidly collapsing the paradigm the person was holding on to. So when you do a magic trick, it's set up. They think they know where this is going, then bang, you drop a reveal that they never saw coming. All the paradigms collapse and they're amazed, right? Comedy, set up, and then punchline. They never saw coming and they burst out laughing. So I studied stage magic and comedy and devised a pattern of choreography to talk through a model in front of an audience or an individual that does that exact same thing. So we set up through the model, and then we call it a punchline effect. Bang, drop a punchline that completely shatters the paradigm they were holding on to. And in that same instant, offers them a structured, organized framework, which is the model for them to hold on to. Because if you collapse someone's paradigm, there's a vacuum, and nature hates a vacuum. They need to fill it with something, and you get to fill it with the model. Because what happens is most people, if we think about results over time, most people want to hold on to status quo. And all status quo means is that I understand all the patterns that are in play in my world around me at the moment. Like I know all the patterns. That's what status quo is, right?
It's safe. It's easy. There's no cognitive load.
Yep. And I feel like I'm in control, right?
Yeah.
There's this weird space in here, but out on the other side of that space is all progress. All progress is on the trailing edge of this space in the middle. And so what is this space through the middle? And that space is chaos. All progress lives on the trailing edge of chaos. Something happened that forced people to figure out how to solve a previously unexperienced problem. All that chaos is, there are patterns. There's patterns for everything, but all chaos is that we haven't discovered the pattern yet, but it is absolutely there, right? And the person that figures out how to connect the dots of the patterns tends to control chaos, and they become the innovators and the leaders of the world because they find the patterns, right? Now, to prove that everything has patterns, I started thinking about what's the most random thing I could think of. And I thought, well, luck. It's pretty random. Does luck have patterns? And the answer is absolutely it does. So in Western Australia, where I live, you can download an Excel spreadsheet with every winning lottery game since 1986. I took that file to a biomedical statistician friend of mine. And I said, Satvinder, are there any patterns in that? And he said, absolutely. And he spat out a whole algorithm that picked up all the patterns that existed. So, for example, 80% of all winning lottery games fall within a certain sum total of the 6 numbers. If you're outside of that, you're outside the odds. 80% of all winning lottery games have an even spread of low, mid, and high range numbers. 80% of all lottery games have an even split of odd and even. 80% of all lottery games have at least one pair and one split pair. 1 and 3 are a pair, and a split pair is 1 and 2 is a pair, and 1 and 3 is a split pair. You can cover every possible pair and split pair combination in 21 games with a specific numbering system using the first 3 numbers. 80% of all games have at least one new number that wasn't there the week before, and 80% of all games have at least one number that was there the week before. Anyway, this was going on, and I said, Satvinder, could you write me a little program for this? He said, I can, for sure, but it's not going to let you win Division 1. What it will do is let you win Division 3 or 4 75% of the time. All of a sudden, the lottery just became a job, because if 3 weeks out of 4 you win Division 3 and 4, you're way ahead of everybody else. You know, we ran that, and it's true. And then we thought, what about competitions, you know, winning trips and cars and stuff like that? And so we studied that, and there are patterns. And now the media in Australia call my wife Australia's competition queen, because we've won around $1.5 million worth of prizes. We, you know, when we were doing it like a little bit seriously, so we'd spend about 10 hours a week doing this, we'd win prizes worth about $50,000 per year. Like we've won 2 family trips to Disney World in Florida, or a car, 2 family trips to London. We've won, you know, backstage passes and dinner with celebrities that have come to do a big concert or whatever. We won a drive for me in Rally Australia one year. You know, it's just like stuff you can't buy, right? And, you know, one time one of the TV stations was doing a special, like a story on us. Every Christmas, they'll contact my wife and go, hey, listen, you need to go to the studio in Perth. We want to do a live cross on how you can buy stuff for Christmas and, you know, win prizes and things like that. So, yeah, but they came to the house and said, we want you to put everything in one room that you've won. And it was everything. It was like the microwaves. We have 2 microwaves in our kitchen, and everyone should have 2 microwaves. Once you've had 2, you'll never go back to 1, but we have 2 because we won 2, right? So the TVs were all won. Our daughters supplied all their own stuff as kids, winning competitions. And if we teach people what to do, they will often win a trip within 3 or 4 months, because it has a pattern. There are things that you can do. So what happens is that all we're doing with models is unpacking the patterns that already exist, using geometry to do that. And geometry is an unbelievably sophisticated art form to unpack people's genius. So in here, people have what we call intuitive genius, but you can't sell your intuition. The market can't buy your intuition. It's amorphous. It doesn't have shape and form and structure. But the patterns exist in the person's head, often the founder. And they have difficulty communicating that to everybody else in a structured way. But when we capture this intuitive genius into structure, it becomes organized genius. And you can step the marketplace through that, because the trailing edge of chaos is innovation. This is the most important thing. The leading edge of chaos is leadership, because the job of the leader or the business owner or the salesperson is to lead people into chaos safely. If you sell a complex product or service, you sell enterprise software or technology. I've worked on a lot of projects to implement SAP over the years as a consultant, lots, right? And every company I've ever worked with who's hired me, here's the interesting thing. I get hired by companies to help them implement SAP because they didn't trust SAP, right? Because everyone had such nightmare stories about SAP being implemented. And so they'd hire me to facilitate this, right? But SAP is a fantastic platform for large corporate level enterprise, right? If the people would just implement it the way SAP tell them to implement it. Because SAP go, we've kind of figured out all the workflows and we've built the platform for it. And if you just implement the platform and get your people to change to accommodate the workflows, it'll be great. And every company goes, no, we've got our own workflows. We want you to modify SAP for our workflows. And yeah, but your workflows.
Well, I used to run a CRM consulting business, and it was the two-sided coin, because, as you say, the clients would say, Dom, you don't understand. Our industry is unique. And in our industry, we are a unique company.
Yeah.
And we'd go, oh, of course. And then we'd say, well, because that thing you want to do that's unique and world-class that only you do, we'd say, oh, I think that's going to take about 6 months of development. And then we get in the car park and somebody said, didn't we do that last week for somebody? And we're like, yeah, that's what we.
So the interesting thing is, like, why don't you implement it the way we built it? No, you're right. We're unique. We've got specific workflows. We're geographically spread. Oh, because no other company ever has been. And what we need you to do is modify the software to do it our way. Okay, great. But what if your processes suck?
Now you're telling people that children are ugly. Your processes suck.
No, well, we need to implement a new CRM. Why? Because, we need to improve our level of customer care. What if your people are just useless? What if it's not a CRM that's the problem? The CRM is not going to fix that. So, here's the thing, though. You have to be masterful enough to have those conversations with people in here. What if your team is useless? What if your processes suck? Safely. The sage has this ability to have these conversations with people. And it's probably worth me drawing a model about the sage in a minute, but the sage has this ability to have conversations with people that are so powerful and so confronting and so paradigm collapsing, but in a way that makes them feel so safe and grateful that you had that conversation with them, that they're willing to step into chaos because they believe that you could carry them into chaos. This is one of the most important things about leadership. People's willingness to step into chaos is directly proportional to their sense of the leadership's courage. People's willingness to step into chaos is directly proportional to how courageous they believe their leader is. And when they believe they have a courageous leader who can make me safe, I'm going to step into that chaos with you. And there's some other mechanics around that. There's some human psychology around that. Your team will step in and then pop out again, and step in a bit further and pop out again. We call this spinning on the edge of the discomfort zone. And at some point when they pop in, you have to just shove them hard enough that they bounce through and realize, oh, actually, this all makes sense, but safely. The models are this really, really powerful tool for unpacking deep, complex things in a way that everyone can understand it. And the choreography is how you keep people safe as you do that. And so, one of the things that your listeners might want to think about is how they position in the marketplace. So we know that people position in the marketplace, we just know this from the work that we've done, at one of 4 levels. Now, slow me down if you want to talk about anything, but
as you're drawing there, just thinking about that, the chaos model that you had up there. And it occurs to me that in my head, I have this model, which is sort of 3s and 10s. And at about 30 people in an organization, because the complexity comes from the people and not the revenue. At about 30 people stop putting the cups in the dishwasher. And then everyone goes like, what's happened? Like, everyone used to be self-reliant and accountable, and the dishwasher thing is just a sort of a proxy for it all getting away from it. So all starts to feel difficult. And at 100 people, you not only do you need a leadership team, but you need a management team, and all of these, and at each one of these tens and threes and tens, 300 the next one, you need to rip out your systems and replace them all because you've outgrown all your people and you've outgrown all your processes. And people get at each of those points, it's like that push through. And people don't know what to do. They're hanging on to status quo. So as you were drawing the model, I was thinking, I see exactly this play out all of the time. In fact, most of the time, that's why people pick the phone up and ring me and say, I've got into this really uncomfortable place. Please help me push through to the other side.
What they're saying is, I can't see any pattern here. And of course, what you just articulated is a pattern that you know to be true and other people don't see it. And they're coming to you saying, we need you to have the courage to help us to push to the other side. And in your head, the answer is, I don't need courage. I have genius, because genius means I know the patterns that others don't, right? And it's interesting. I read somewhere that the Amish people, they have no police in their villages, but as soon as the village gets to 47 people, they peel it off and start another village just a mile away, because 47 is a bit of a magical number in terms of self-regulating, village community and all this sort of business. When you're talking about those, 10 and 30 and 300, people in the collective need a direct connection to who's leading them. The volunteer engagement research said that people leave leaders, they don't leave companies. When they interviewed a bunch of people and said, why did you leave your last job? The people who left said, because of my team leader. What did you tell the company? I told them I left for a better opportunity. When they went and interviewed the companies that these people had left, they said, why do most people leave? They said, to go to better opportunity, right? Completely the reverse. And so chaos is it's just a great example, Dominic, of a pattern that most people don't know.
Yeah.
And then once they see it, the paradigm is collapsed now. Like the paradigm has been completely collapsed. Okay, what does that mean? And so, when you're talking to people, we know that the world of marketing said to people, if you've got a complex product or service, you need to systemize it, turn it into a product and sell it, become a vendor of a product or service. Now, the SaaS world is really clever thinking and turn it into a software platform. Turn it into a product, right? For $39 to $97 per month. So in other words, as soon as you become a vendor, you are competing on price. And it's very hard to get out of that space once that's happened. Then the marketing world said, well, we're not happy with this because we can't get a premium, right? So I use Ontraport. I'm not sure what CRMs you've helped people with, but I've heard people saying, Ontraport costs $297 a month. I'm going, that's about the best money I spend every year, because of what it does for us and how much information it contains and what we can do with it. Like, it is a powerhouse, and I don't understand where people think, like, this software program I'm drawing on, right, is Notability on my iPad. Look at what it's doing. And I get up at conferences and speak and draw on the big screen. Everyone's taken photo of my screens and they want my file afterwards. And I go, I'll send it to you. Give me your email addresses, right? Because it couldn't be put into the conference organizer's pack because I hadn't built it yet. I'm going to build it live in front of the audience, right? And so people go, what's the program? I go, it's Notability. And they go, right. I've actually had people say to me, while we're on the call, that's like $13. That's quite expensive for an app. I'm going, are you kidding me? That's the vendor-based price level of the marketplace, right?
I think that all the time there's that I think about it as it goes back to the other model. It's status quo, right? So it's cost, not value. It's what's the short-term cost, not the value. And it's just a mindset thing.
Yeah. So there's two sides to this model divided by the middle. The bottom side is the free side, and the top half of the model is the paid and premium side. So on the free side, people said, well, we don't like being priced. We don't like being shopped on price. So let's do content-based marketing. Let's put content out into the market, and everyone needs to become a thought leader. Now, thought leadership is completely commoditized because everyone's calling themselves a thought leader, including that person on LinkedIn who has 2 people looking at their post calling themselves a thought leader, right? And to be a thought leader, you need an original thought and you need followers. Like if you have original thinking but no followers, you're just a really good thinker. If you have a bunch of followers but it's not your stuff, you're a great communicator, right? But you're not a thought leader. And so people go to the thought leader for free information. I'd love to grab a coffee. Well, here's what I do. I share my thinking, Yeah, but, like I can't afford you. Well, then I shouldn't talk to you. People are really awkward about all of that, right? The next level up is you become a hero to your clients. So they have a problem. When someone is a hero to their clients are coming to them for strength. You can save me, but it does make your clients victims who need you. And these 2 levels really require you to sell, or that's outside the picture. These 2 levels really require you to sell on ego. I'm a thought leader. I'm a hero, right? And that's why a lot of people are uncomfortable about the whole idea of selling. You have to go out and say, look at me, I'm a thought leader. Look at me, I'm a hero, blah, blah, blah. But Luke Skywalker had Yoda. Every hero has a sage, and the sage is often smaller and physically weaker than the hero. But Yoda said to Luke Skywalker, get your lightsaber, Luke, come at me. And Luke says, I can't, Master, I'll hurt you. And Yoda, this little chunky thing,
Green
said, no,
thing.
Luke, come at me. And Luke says, I can't. And he says, pick up your lightsaber, Luke, come at me. So Luke goes at him half-baked, and Yoda flicks the lightsaber away, and Luke gets a little bit revved up, so he comes at him a bit harder, and Yoda flicks his lightsaber away. Eventually, Luke's really angry, and he comes at Yoda, and Yoda shuts his eyes, and he goes, zoo, 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 and flicks his lightsaber away. And Luke's confused. He goes, I don't understand. And Yoda goes, it's the Force, Luke, right? And what the sage is sharing is wisdom. The sage has this positioning, which is really super powerful. The sage has what I firstly call profound genius, which is why we doubled down on genius. When you can capture the profound genius in what you do in a way that everyone understands it, and when you stop selling products and services and you start selling deep, profound, organized genius, the market starts to realize that whatever you bring to the market is probably going to be amazing, because you're selling from wisdom, not ego. The second thing that the sage has is powerful calm. The sage sells through presence, not pressure. That should have 2 S's, but it doesn't matter. When people come into the world of the sage, they just feel this calming effect. And it doesn't mean that the sage is introverted or anything like that. It's just that they know that things will be okay if I hang out or buy from or go with this person. And the third thing the sage has is what I call practical simplicity. They have the ability to create clarity and not complexity. And so many people sell complex products and services by creating more complexity for the buyer. There was even a sales methodology for it under the old pressure and false scarcity and urgency approach, which was the harder you make it for people to understand it, the more they have to buy from you because they can't do it themselves. What actually happens is they don't buy at all. They just don't solve their problem because it just seems too hard, right? When you move to the sage and you acquire these things, in our world, we do that by capturing the genius into a model. Who gets to occupy the hero space? It's the clients. All of a sudden, your clients become the hero in their own story, and everything about how you're selling and communicating changes in that instant. Because it's not you saying, look at me, I'm the hero, I'm going to save you. It's you saying, I can equip you to be a hero in your own story. And here's the framework through which I do that. Here's the structured, organized genius that sits behind that. And we're always coming up with new products and services. So I'm going to come back to the question you asked about levels of value. I haven't forgotten that because I think it'll be really useful for people if I talk about the dimensions of value. Like there are 3 dimensions and 3 levels of value. The model that you're talking about was probably when I was talking about the kinds of service levels that we need to offer the marketplace. And so there are 4 levels of service a lot of people experience. Some people buy a product or service and then they're disappointed by the delivery of that product or service. So that's the first level. And sadly, there's a lot of businesses in the world delivering at a disappointing level of service, right? In fact, I think that's a lot of people's most common experience.
Most companies.
Yeah. So
I
most
just,
Yeah. So
bit rubbish.
most buyers have been tuned into expect disappointment, right? Think about that. Going to go and buy a product or service, but expect disappointment, right? The next level up is when you deliver. So you buy a product or service and, it delivers what's promised. Okay. So that's not as common as disappointment, but it's better than disappointment. And so imagine some companies go, you should buy, I think you're wearing a Garmin watch like me. And, I'm a Phoenix 6 transitioning to the Epics. So, I'm a Garmin, fanboy, right? I'd never buy the Apple Watch once you've owned a Garmin, right? So the watch is completely separate to the experience of who you're buying it from. And, how does the company stand behind it, right? Amazing product, amazing watch. And then imagine if the people selling it to you go, and we're going to strive to just deliver service to you. You'd be underwhelmed. It wouldn't it's just, we're going to try and deliver. Well done. Fabulous. The next level is where you delight the customer. So you do something that was unexpected, right? And, when you go and buy that watch, because Garmin are quite a complex piece of equipment, there's a lot of stuff on them. They take a little bit of setting up and you buy it. And the person who sold it to you says, let me step you right through this thing and let's get this set up if you've got the time today. Because I want you to put this watch on as you leave here and be using it right out of the box, right? But there's a bit of setting up to do. So how about we go through that? And you got any questions about this watch, just, email me direct. We just bought a fridge recently and the guy that ended up selling us the fridge knocked the socks out of delighting us. Knocked the socks out of it, right? My wife and I walked in the store, 9:00 Monday morning. I said, are you the fridge guy? He said, I am. Your fridge is broken down, hasn't it? And I said, yep. And he said, and it's pretty old, like it's more than 10 years old, right? And I go, yeah. How do you know that?
It's Monday at 9:00.
So we'd been to another shop and they'd said, we should be able to get that to you the 7th of February. We've had this fridge 3 weeks and they were promising to be able to get us one by the 7th of February. Talk about disappointing. This guy's going, nah, you need it today. He is delighting us, right? So they're the 3 levels a lot of people think about. But there's a 4th level that people don't really think about, and that is defend the customer. When you defend the customer, no matter what, you defend them against the situation they're struggling with. You defend them when they don't think the thing is working the way it should work, and you go, well, let me look into that. You don't try and push back. You don't try and say, well, it's probably your fault. It's probably a user issue. They say, hey, this is not working. You go, well, let's sort it out, right? You defend their right to expect the thing they paid the money for to work. The typical transactions are not equal. Customer pays you $1. It will do what $1 does. It will be worth $1. If they put it in the bank, it'll still be worth $1 when they go to use it. When they go to use it, it will work. And then you give them value worth $1. That's a lottery. That may or may not work. The odds are actually stacked against the buyer. So when we defend the customer and we say, we're going to defend your need and right to solve this problem no matter what, and defend your right to expect the most from us. One of our company values is kindness, because I simply refuse, and my team are wonderful at this too, I simply refuse to allow our team to have a conversation in any kind of condescending way about a customer inside our own team when the customer's not listening. There is no license.
You got to get them on the phone.
No, you're not even allowed to be condescending to them on the phone.
I'm joking.
We are never to talk about a customer in a negative way, because they just have a need, right? And so when you defend the hell out of the customer, they just experience this buyer safety in a way that they're not getting from anyone else, right? The 4 levels of service. But so many people are not even getting past, well, we deliver what we promise. Imagine you go to a restaurant and they say, so glad you came in. We've got great food and high quality service. Well, I hope so. I haven't come out for rubbish food and a bad time. Right? So this is table stakes. It's below what I call I should bloody hope so line. If every business judged themselves by the I should bloody hope so line, hey, we've got great food, fabulous ambiance and terrific service. Why should bloody hope so? That's table stakes. What is going to get me to tell 8 other people to come to this restaurant no matter what, right? Because great food, ambiance and quality service isn't going to do it. That's delay the I should bloody hope. Buy our car, it won't break down. I should bloody hope so. I haven't bought a car, but buy our Range Rover, it'll never get stolen. Really? With what's going on in the world at the moment. So these levels of service, like defend the hell out of the customer. And then there's another whole conversation about value that actually goes with that. And we capture all of these in models because when you draw it, when you show it to people, I don't know how we're going time-wise, but there's two little models that I'd love to draw that will help you understand it.
I'm okay if you are.
I just looked at my watch like I pretended to know what time we started, but I'm going to have to leave the timing to you to manage. I'd love to just draw a little bit about what's going on underneath all of this and the psychology of it, if that's okay. It'll help people to really think about what's going on. If we think about how people absorb information, and these scales, when you deal with people, you're generally dealing with an emotional scale and a logical scale, right? The vertical scale is the logical scale. The horizontal scale is the emotional scale. If all we use is words down here, people say, I hear you, but it's just noise. And the problem is everything that comes into the human brain, and remember, we've got to invade their thinking, everything that comes into the human brain comes in through the senses. Now, there's more than 5 senses. The research has clearly shown us that. Body movement is a sense, but we predominantly think about the 5 primary senses of, visual, auditory, kinesthetic, gustatory, and olfactory. Now, smell and taste is kind of less than 7% of how the information, I think it's less than 4% of how the information comes into us from the world around us. And in selling, licking and sniffing are not recommended strategies.
Unless you're a dog.
No, I wouldn't use them, right? I'd just forget those two, right? So now we're left with visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. So if we use words only, and this is along the logical scale down here, the vertical, the logical scale. If we use words only, we're only using about 11% of how information, the auditory channel only accounts for about 11% of the information that's coming into the human brain. And there are millions of bits of information coming into the human brain every minute, right? So if we give people visual access to the information, and the optic nerve, the visual cortex accounts for about 83% of the information that comes into the human brain, people say, I see. And what we see is much more interesting than what we hear. Remember the boys that got stuck in the cave, the soccer team in Thailand, those boys? I don't know about you, but I heard the news report on the radio first, right? And they were just reading out saying, a boys soccer team got stuck in a cave in Thailand and they're worried about the floods, drowning them. And I'm thinking, well, you walked in, walk out. I don't understand the problem, right? But then they showed us the schematics that we all saw of the tunnel. They hadn't walked in at all. They crawled and shimmied and everything else. Now I'm thinking, well, that was silly, going in there. But so much more interest. Now we're into the story. We're invested, right? As people move from noise to interesting, they get invested. That's fine. You can do all of that with stock images and clip art and everything else. What I realized was there's a visual side, but there's also a structural side. When you can give people structural access to an idea, when you can help them to understand it in an organized way, which most people don't do, they say, oh, I get it. And this is believable. So this model that I'm walking through at the moment is just a model I made up that is a collation of a whole bunch of research that I've done, but I built the model. I invented the model, and I'm walking through it in a very specific choreography, but me drawing out the model makes it believable. Me drawing the model draws people in rather than if I was just clicking through this. So when we give people visual access and we give them structural access, they say, well, I see, I get it, this is desirable. So we've got interest level, curiosity. We've moved from I'm invested to I'm curious about how this works because the curiosity came from the bottom. And then what I realized was if I treat this like a performance, so let's call this 8 out of 10 on both those scales. If I treat this like a performance where we have build up, paradigm, collapse and replace, desirable becomes buyable. And we did that with choreography. So the first thing we've got to do is build the models, figure out what's the genius, unpack the genius of an entire company in a single framework that you can walk through in less than 7 minutes. And when people see real genius, like, I use the example sometimes of a company that I've worked with for years who builds ships for navies and high-speed ferries, right? But if they can explain the entire process of building a ship in a single model that takes about 7 minutes, and someone on the procurement team says, how come no one else has explained that simply for us before? You're in an entirely different positioning to the rest of the marketplace.
Watching your models, I have an interesting sensation. And it feels as though, because I'm listening to you and I'm watching you draw, my power of disagreeing with you has been sort of suppressed, right? Because I'm watching and listening. You're sort of taking me through it. Whereas if I was just listening to you, I've probably got enough cycles to go, no, don't agree with you. No, I think you're wrong. And sort of it feels almost overwhelming in a way that's part of the power of why it works.
Here's some things that are happening. I could never have had this conversation that's in front of you now without drawing it. I would have lost you when I describe the two axes, right? But even if I do it without drawing it, let's say I'm going to use an iceberg. I go, hey, imagine an iceberg. There's 3 levels. The bit above the water, the bit right below the water, and the bit right at the base. Now you're filling in the pictures in your own head, and you're going to start building the model. Every time I put something into the model, I'm looking for punchlines all the way through. So when I've drawn 83% visual access, you're going, yeah, that's true, actually. And I go, I hear you, but it's just noise. You go, yeah, that's true, right? You just tick that bit off. And then I go, but when we give people visual access, they go, oh, I see, and that's interesting. You go, yeah, that's true. Now you've ticked off 2 parts of my model. And I'm getting incremental agreement. I'm not looking for entire agreement at the end, right? But there's a part that most people don't do, and your brain's going, what's that part? I want to know what that part is, because that's going to be special. It's structural access. Oh, I get it. Yeah. So organizing yes, I get that. And so when you give them structural access, they go, I get it. And that's believable. Yeah, that's true. When we see this picture, and that's true, right? And then, oh, I want desirable. So yeah, if I get all of this, I can get all that. So that's the first thing that's happening. The second thing that is happening is every empty space in the model is an open loop in marketing terms. And so imagine if I'd done this, there's a really interesting model, a 2x2 matrix, logic on the vertical, emotion on the horizontal. Each of these quadrants is a level of how people receive information from you. And, the first one is if you just use words only, and I'm up against it here, so, time is an issue. People say, I hear you. But then they're just going to say, well, that's noise, right? Now, there are things that we can do up here and things that we can do out here that shift you into entirely different quadrants. And if we put those 2 things together, you're going to get this super sales quadrant here where you'll sell super effectively. And then this little hidden bit up the top where you're just going to annihilate the rest of the market. But I don't have the time to finish that off. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to leave it there. Your mind will be going nuts, saying, I have to know what the rest of that model is. It's okay, Simon, I've got a bit of extra time. Could you walk me through it? Well, unfortunately, we only had 1 hour scheduled in your diary for this meeting, so I don't want to be disrespectful. No, that's fine. I can move something off. I want to see the rest of the model, right? There's 2 things, 2 forces in play in your mind going on at the same time. One is you're resolving a complex story through the incremental agreement of the models I walk through it, which is why I'm doing things all the way through the choreography to check, test, and confirm agreement. And then you're also looking forward into the model, thinking there's more stuff in this that I want to know what it is. And then I'm going to preserve a piece of the model for the punchline. That's why this is a hidden area. It doesn't go up until the end, but there's this super green zone that no one else knows about kind of thing, this secret thing. So what's actually happening when we communicate with people, when we try to influence people, humans have a high intensity or a low intensity for things. And then over time and effort, we want to bring people around to our ideas. Now, we know that humans, as a default position, have a high intensity for resistance. Humans are hardwired to say no. And we have to be, because that's how we survive, right? You know, do you want to do this? No, thanks. May I help you? No, thanks, just looking. You walked into the shop. But why have you said no thanks? I'm just looking. And then 3 minutes later, you're going to go up to that person going, hey, do you have one of these things? And the shop assistant's thinking, why don't you just ask me when I offered to help? Right now, I'm working with another customer and you're standing around putting pressure on this conversation, right? But no thanks, just looking. No, I don't want it. And our system for selling has to be better than their system for saying no. But the other thing that's important is humans have a low intensity for acceptance. We have no hard wiring for saying yes to things. In fact, we really avoid saying yes to things. Dominic, I'm having such a good time. I really appreciate you inviting me onto your podcast. And actually, I've had a look at the shows and they're fantastic. You go, oh, no, it's all part of what I do. Like, we're not good at accepting accolades or, you know, congratulations and things like that. And in selling, the point of conversion occurs when these two curves reverse. That's when a conversion occurs. It's a conversion to the idea that I'm going to own this product or service, or conversion to the idea that this thing will solve my problem. Through here, they're pushing back until the curves reverse. This is where the selling occurs. And in order to try and make that happen faster, we've slipped into a world of high pressure selling. Put pressure on to get the curves to reverse. But if you fill a container with more pressure, you just push the sides further apart. You don't bring them together. If you can make this happen, you pop out the other side where instead of selling, you're facilitating a conversation. So frustrate them for 3/4 of the available time. In other words, have enough patience to allow them to get frustrated enough that they desperately want to solve their problem. Pop a model in front of them that shows them structured, organized genius that will solve their problem. And you'll find you're having a conversation with them about how they can use your model rather than should they use your model, which is on the left-hand side of that point of conversion. These two models by themselves should be the basis of how everybody thinks about how they organize their selling and sales conversation, particularly their conversion conversation. And yet, I draw through these models and people are saying that is just unique. I've never seen it explained like that, but this is just the pattern of human behavior, right? So I want to get people to this point where they have enough motivation to really want to solve their problem and enough curiosity to recognize it when they see it. When they've got enough motivation, these curves will reverse because they want to solve it. And if they see a framework, a structured, organized framework that they think, yeah, that's probably going to get this done. That's like a blueprint for the brain sitting between me and my problem that is going to get this thing done. I want to buy that blueprint. They buy the model before they buy the product or service. And so, you know, we're openly saying to the marketplace, the market can't buy your intuitive genius. You have to codify your genius in a highly visible, highly organized framework that gives your customer the confidence that that's a blueprint that will work no matter what your product or service is, and that they're going to be safer with you than they will be with any other solution because of the genius you bring to the market. The curves will flip almost immediately.
I think, Simon, that I feel like I could just listen to you all day. Fantastic. But what is it you know now that you wish you'd known earlier?
Well, there's two. Can I share two things with you?
Sure.
I've worked with a lot of CEOs, you know, done a lot of one-to-one mentoring with a lot of people. I'm in my 60s. So, you know, I've lived a chunk of life. I've lived at least, you know, I'm on the 2/3 cusp, right, heading towards the 3/4 mark. And just a really,
Don't
really...
give up.
No, I'm not. I feel like I'm just hitting my straps, to be honest. But, you know, over many years and working with a lot of people, and even in terms of family and everything else, everybody that I've ever met has something within them that is genius. And they may or may not have had the opportunity to explore it and extract it. The greatest lottery for all of us in life is where and who you were born to. You know, that is the game-changing move for some people, and you know, the restricting move for others. So we biggest lottery in life is where and who you were born to. But put that aside, in other words, what opportunities and circumstances surrounded you, everyone has some level of genius within them that, if it's explored fully over life, has the ability to impact other people in profound and significant ways. And then hand in hand with that, everybody I've ever met has something they're going through. It might be them personally, or it might be other people they care deeply about. But everybody's got something that's going on. And it would serve us all well to remember those two things. Everybody should be valued and everybody should be cared for, right? And you engage with people differently if you approach the world like that, And honestly, people want to engage with people that make them safe and help them to win. We sell the same two things. Everyone sells the same two things. First and foremost, people want to be made safe. They don't always want to behave safely, but they want to be made safe. And so that's when, when people are dealing with the thing that is their challenge at that point in time, and we all have multiple challenges over time, just know that everybody's got their thing, right? Every time you have a thing, you also need to know that this too shall pass. So it really is just step at a time. I could do a whole study around time, but step at a time, be present. I've worked with a lot of elite athletes. They are very much in the moment most of the time, in the present. Step at a time, this too shall pass. It may not always get to where you want it to be, but it will pass. And everybody's got their thing. If we actually understood that, we'd be much more compassionate and forgiving and caring for people that we're working with. And we would want to defend the hell out of the customers and offer them greater safety than they have with anyone else. And everybody has some real genius about them. So when you sell a product or service to somebody, maybe you're not really solving their problem. Maybe you're equipping them to take their genius to the world in a way that impacts other people in ways that you never could with what you do. And you're helping them to win. Everybody wants someone to make them safe, and everyone wants to win. They don't want to be average, right? And they want someone who helps them to win. If I knew 30 years ago that we all sell the same two things, no matter the product or service, safety and helping them to win, because everyone has a level of genius in them and everyone has their challenge, the thing that they have to deal with, I think my own sales results would have been so much greater, so much earlier. And I think more than ever, we need a more compassionate world and more courageous leaders, more than we ever have done in my lifetime. And I think business, in the hands of the right leaders, is the most powerful force for good on the planet. So selling should be the most noble thing we do, to equip people with the things that allow them to impact the world and allow them to buy from us, because we're going to look after them. I don't mean ask me the models method, but whatever you sell, allow them to buy from you because you're going to look after them, right? But I didn't have the maturity to understand that stuff when I was 30, and definitely not when I was 20. And maybe I was starting to get onto the edge of it at 40. But, you got to live through some things,
Yeah. Experience.
Yeah.
Can't teach experience. What books should people pick up? What are some of your favorites?
Well, I love the Go Giver series. Bob Burg's written a number of books around Go Givers, but Go Givers is a great book. There's it's called The Motivation Manifesto, and Brendan Burchard, The Motivation Manifesto is a great book. There's another book that I found to be fascinating, and it's sort of, people either love it or hate it, right? And if you read it deeply, and the majority of people that I talk about with this that have read it have loved it. And then the other people said, I don't get it, right? Napoleon Hill, after he wrote Think and Grow Rich, wrote a book called Outwitting the Devil, which I think is a clearer, more impactful expression of the human condition. And in it, he's saying, he has this plot line where he imagines himself doing an interview with the devil, which is why some people hate it, right? But he's asking the devil, and he could have been on drugs at the time, I don't know. But when he told his wife, here's what I've written, she said, they'll drive us out of town. You're talking to the devil. And so he promised her it wouldn't get published until they both died. And so it didn't get published until 2010 or something. But he's got this kind of literary technique where he's interviewing the devil, and he's saying to the devil, can you tell me how you make most men fail at life? And he says, well, I only need three things. I need to get them to drift. The difference, successful people are decisive. Successful people make informed decisions. I need to get people to drift. And so smoke or drink, these are all drift behaviors, like a lack of self-discipline. I just need to get people to drift. That's the first thing. The second thing I need to do is turn that into a hypnotic rhythm. In other words, a habit. And then the third thing I need to do is just wait for the simple passing of time, because time compounds everything. And one little bad habit becomes a massive bad habit 10 years down the track and then becomes an addiction. And so I can cause most men to fail if I get them to drift, establish hypnotic rhythm, and then just wait for the simple passing of time. And that is about as acute explanation of the difference between success and failure I've ever actually seen. And of course, I already had a model that explained that. So then I immediately used that model to summarize the book, which was my futures model. So Outwitting the Devil, Motivation Manifesto, Go Givers, lots of great books. Oh, and another book called Someone Has to Be the Most Expensive in the Market. Why not make it you? Right?
Oh, I love that. I love that.
Here's the reality. In every single marketplace, there is a company that is the most expensive. There has to be in order to have average, right? And they're often doing very well. How could that be? Especially when people say, my market only buys on price. That's never true. Someone has to be the most expensive.
The subtitle of that book, something about, and you have to create the value to make it true or something, isn't it?
Well, in the, and Andrew's saying, you need to sell something that's really valuable, right? And we would say, well, then unpack your genius. What you should be selling is your genius rather than products and services. So everyone's making offers and selling products and services. Everyone sells the same and sounds the same, so therefore they are the same. We would say, this is not Andrew's words, but we would say sell your genius to the marketplace and have them buy you and know that everything you do is going to actually solve the problem. So he is absolutely saying you better have something worth selling. But if you do, Dominic, so many people come up to me and say, we've got a way better product than our competitors, but they get a higher price than us and we just need a better story. And my question is, have you bought their product? Well, no, we haven't. Well, how do you know yours is way better than theirs? I'd go and buy their product. What if it's not? What if they're better than you? What if they just sell better than you?
Do you know, you were talking earlier about restaurants and table stakes. I am amazed. Sometimes I'm sitting in a restaurant, I'm thinking, the people who run this place or pub, they just haven't been anywhere else, because otherwise they'd realize how shit they are and why their place is not as busy as they would like it to be.
Yeah.
God.
I remember talking to a guy that sold BMWs. I did a lot of work in the motor industry, retail sales, right, with salespeople, training salespeople. I remember talking to a guy at a BMW dealership. He's saying BMW is the best car on the market. I go, I don't think so. And like, you haven't convinced me yet. And he goes, well, what's a better car? And I go, well, I reckon Rolls-Royce owners would say it's a better car. I reckon, McLaren owners would say it's a better car. I reckon Mini owners would say it's a better car because, it depends what they're looking for. But look at all the features on the BMW. And at the time, Ford in Australia had I can't remember the model of the car. It was made for the European market. It had the indicators on the left-hand side instead of the right-hand side and all the stuff you had to put up with because it was European design. But it had everything feature-wise that the BMW had in it and some, and it was $50,000 as opposed to like 100 through to 200,000. I said to him, I reckon that's a better car. Like, it does everything your BMW does, but it's way, way cheap. Well, a BMW owner would never buy one of them. I said, why don't we test it? Why don't we, let's go out and talk to a BMW owner and you pitch a new BMW to them and I'll pitch this car to them and we'll just see if they've got a shadow of a doubt, because they're probably only buying the BMW for ego. They just don't want to be seen in a Ford. But let's just see which car they think stacks up. And he wouldn't do it.
But you see, that's what they're buying. They're not buying the features and benefits. They're buying the ego. It's like,
right. So stop selling them the car.
Totally. The Tesla owner's buying smugness.
Of course. Smoke and mirrors, right? Stop selling them the car. So he said, well, they buy it because they'd never buy anything else. So I go, great. Next time a BMW owner comes in to buy a car, say to him, I'm not going to show you a car because you will never buy anything but a BMW. I'm just going to tell you how much you need to spend to keep your ego in this space. you'd be surprised. Some of them are going, you're right. Like, all right, then I'll just upgrade my lease and release it and everything else. So someone has to be the most expensive, and the person that understands the marketplace more deeply than everybody else, which means you have more intel, you know more about your competitors, you know how they sell, you've probably bought their product or service, or you've bought enough products or services equivalent to theirs in the marketplace to know how yours stacks up. Think about elite sport. I don't know what sports you follow, but imagine a team wanting to win the premiership, and they don't see it necessary to pay any attention at all to what the other teams are like, or how prepared they are, or who their players are, or what their game plans might be. The people in sales that say, I don't pay any attention to the competition, they don't matter, are not in the game to win it. They're in the game to play it safe. Sales and business is a full contact sport. And, that means there's competitors in the marketplace and there are spectators watching who are paying money to come through the gate. And you need them to come to your gate and buy your membership and support your club. And to do that, you need to win more often than not. And to do that, you need to know who you're beating and what that looks like. And so Andrew's course is saying, you better sell something good. And if you do, someone's got to be the most expensive in the market. Why not make it you? It's a great book. It's really, it's a good thinking book.
Simon, thank you very much indeed for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you.
It's been my pleasure. Really, really enjoyed it.